A long time ago, in one busy part of Ibadan, where churches stood almost door to door and marriage advice flowed more than pure water, there was one famous pastor called Pastor Elijah. Now, this man was not popular for miracles or prophecy. His own ministry was submission ministry. Every morning, married women rushed to his live stream with notebooks and biros like they were preparing for WAEC examination. Yes, daddy. Teach us, sir. Scatter feminism. It is destroying our churches. With his deep voice, clean white suits, and soft spiritual accent, the man spoke like somebody heaven personally endorsed for marriage matters. A wise woman does not argue, he would say calmly. Then women will nearly cry from revelation. Meanwhile, inside his own house, peace was running. Pastor Elijah was impossible to live with. The man monitored everything like CCTV. He monitored the salt quantity inside stew. Then he monitored how towels were folded, how long prayers lasted, even how people yawned during prayers. Yes, one evening, Mama Ruth, his wife, served him egusi soup, and the man tasted it as if he was a lab scientist. How many pinchings of salt entered the soup? The dining table became quiet immediately, and the woman answered very carefully, maybe 2. Pastor Elijah sighed deeply. No consistency whatsoever. This is why excellence is disappearing in homes. You have to be consistent. Consistency on top salt? The house was always tense. Nobody fully relaxed. The children were always tensed. They were always walking on eggshells around the man. One day, the pastor brought out a stopwatch during family devotion. Yes, so an actual stopwatch. Samuel prayed only 4 minutes yesterday, he announced seriously. Yes, this is spiritual laziness and he must be delivered. Everybody nearly fainted. Even the dog started avoiding family prayers. He would go and hide just to sleep. Yes, the painful part was that outside, people saw Pastor Elijah as the perfect husband material. Online, he sounded gentle and wise. My daughters, he would say during his live stream, submission brings peace into the home. Don't let the devil deceive you. Submit to your husband. Do not argue with him. When he's talking, keep quiet. Swallow your thoughts. Meanwhile, inside his own home, his wife had not laughed freely in years. Chai, before marriage, Mama Ruth used to dance while cooking, and she used to laugh loudly during gists. But now, she calculated every word before speaking. As Pastor Elijah's fame grew, church women began treating Mama Ruth like living proof that submission could carry a woman to heaven, even without her dying first. After every service, they surrounded her. Mommy G.O., how do you stay so calm? How do you do it? The Holy Spirit must be resting in your bosom. Mommy, your marriage is the standard. Mommy, teach us patience. Mama Ruth would smile softly and nod like somebody returning greeting during burial. Because the truth was simple. The woman was simply not enjoying her marriage. She was just enduring it. But nobody knew, because she looked very peaceful outside. But inside, she was tired. So one Sunday afternoon after service, one young married woman rushed towards her excitedly and said, Mommy Ruth, since I started following Daddy's teachings, my husband now checks my phone less. So Mama Ruth forced a small smile and said, that's good, well done. Another woman quickly joined them. Mommy, how do you handle correction without getting angry? Please teach me. But before Mama Ruth could answer, Pastor Elisha appeared beside them smoothly and then said, Mama Ruth, the children are waiting, And immediately the women adjusted themselves. Sorry, Daddy. Good afternoon, sir. The pastor smiled gently like a harmless saint. No problem, my daughters. Always honor your husbands, eh? As they walked towards the car, Pastor Elijah's smile disappeared instantly. And then he said, "You stood there too long discussing outside." Mama Ruth blinked. "They were only greeting me." That is how unnecessary familiarity starts. Before you know it, they will start whispering some things in your ear. The woman apologized quietly and entered the car. At home, normally now, the tension continued. The children already understood survival tactics at such a young age. Do not laugh loudly. Do not drag your chair carelessly. Do not interrupt daddy. Do not leave cup in the wrong place. In fact, know when to approach your father. One evening, the youngest daughter forgot her school sandals in the sitting room. Pastor Elijah stopped walking and stared at the sandals like a criminal evidence. "Who owns this?" Everybody kept quiet. Even the generator outside sounded afraid. Finally, the little girl raised her hand slowly and said, "I'm sorry, Daddy." The pastor sighed and said, "Carelessness destroys discipline." The girl quickly carried the sandals like a bomb disposal officer. Meanwhile, online, he was still winning. His videos were everywhere. 5 ways wise wives maintain peace. How submission protects marriage. Silence is a woman's power. Thousands of women flooded his DM daily. "Daddy, you are changing lives. Men like you are rare. Mommy Ruth is truly blessed, oh." Mommy Ruth used to hear that word almost all the time and she laughed. Because if this was blessing, then peace must be somewhere very far away from this blessing. Even visitors noticed a strange tension in the house. One afternoon, a church deacon visited unexpectedly. The moment he entered, the children who were laughing loudly upstairs suddenly became quiet. The deacon looked confused. Children were just playing just now, or was I dreaming? Mama Ruth smiled quickly and said, "They are reading now, sir." Meanwhile, upstairs, the children were standing like arrested suspects because they heard their father's car. And because he spoke gently in public, nobody imagined the pressure people lived under his own home. The first crack started appearing during one couple's counseling program on a Saturday afternoon. The hall was filled up with married people pretending everything was fine. Some couples sat closely together but had barely spoken properly in days. One man was even pressing phone while his wife answered counseling questions alone, like a single parent. Then, Pastor Elijah stood confidently at the front with microphone in his hand. "Marriage survives on respect. A wise wife does not challenge authority unnecessarily." Women were nodding, taking down notes, as usual. That was when one elderly woman called Mama Bimpe slowly raised her hand and asked. Everybody knew that this woman feared nobody except maybe high blood pressure. She adjusted her wrapper and spoke innocently. "Daddy, before I ask my question, is mommy alright?" Everywhere became quiet and awkward. Pastor Liza smiled quickly and said, of course, she's fine." But Mama Bimpe was not done. Because mommy has been looking unhappy since this convention started. I couldn't help but notice. Some women turned a little to look at Mama Ruth properly for the first time. Mama Ruth quickly forced a small smile. No, ma, I'm okay." Pastor Elijah laughed softly into the microphone. "You know women and stress? Ministry work is demanding, so you wouldn't blame her if she looks tired and stressed." People laughed it off lightly, and everything continued. But something had already clicked inside of them. The question refused to leave their minds. Yes, for the first time, some women stopped admiring blindly and started observing carefully. Because true, all of them started noticing that Mama Ruth didn't really look happy, and something must be off. A few days after the counseling session, one church woman called Sister Linda stopped by Pastor Elijah's house unexpectedly to drop some documents for an upcoming conference. That was when her eyes fully opened. The moment Mama Ruth opened the door, Linda noticed something. The woman looked exhausted. She didn't look sick. She just looked very drained. Still, she managed to smile politely and welcome her inside. "Sit down, please. Daddy will come down soon, eh?" Linda nodded and sat down carefully in the sitting room. The house was beautiful, neat, well arranged, and it looked expensive. But the atmosphere felt tight. Even the air conditioning could not remove the tension hanging around that place, I'm telling you. Upstairs, children's voices were laughing faintly. But then suddenly, utter silence. A few seconds later, Pastor's voice echoed from upstairs. Why am I hearing noise during study hour? Instant quietness. Linda shifted slightly on the chair, feeling uncomfortable. Then, Mama Ruth quickly disappeared into the kitchen to bring some food because Pastor Elijah was about to eat before leaving for a meeting. A few minutes later, the pastor entered the dining area, wearing his white kaftan and a small smile. Ah, Sister Linda, welcome. Good afternoon, sir. He nodded calmly and sat down to eat. Then everything changed. The man tasted the stew once and frowned immediately. Mama Ruth! That tone alone could freeze a generator. Yes, sir, the woman answered. What is this? Mama Ruth blinked. The stew? Yes, the stew. Why is the salt too much today? Did I not tell you about consistency? Linda looked up slowly. Honestly, the food smelled perfectly fine to her. In fact, she wanted some. Mama Ruth apologized quickly. I'm sorry, sir. I will adjust it next time. But Pastor Elijah didn't want to hear that. He continued. And why is the rice cold already? Must I complain before basic things are done properly in this house? Haba. Hey. The whole atmosphere became very uncomfortable immediately. Mama Ruth stood there quietly, receiving corrections like a schoolgirl caught cheating in an exam hall. Then Pastor Elijah noticed Sister Linda's face and immediately, like someone that cut himself, his voice softened. You know women now, they can be funny sometimes. Linda forced a small smile. But inside, ha, alarm had already started blowing. Because this was not the calm gentleman from live streams, no. This one controlled the entire house like a military man. Even the children upstairs were walking carefully as if they were crossing a landmine. Not long after, Linda stood up to leave because the awkwardness was awkwarding. As Mama Ruth escorted her outside, she looked at her properly again. Mommy, are you okay? Mama Ruth smiled automatically. Her smile is in autopilot. Oh, I'm fine, my sister. Thank you so much. Well, Linda didn't buy it because she couldn't rest properly the whole evening. Finally, she decided to trust one church woman with the news. My sister, I don't think all is well in Daddy's house, so. Just like that, Whisper entered women fellowship quietly. Small, people started paying attention. After Sister Linda's visit, the women in church slowly began to connect the dots. One woman noticed Mama Ruth never laughed freely. Another one realized she always looked tense whenever Pastor Elijah entered the room. Then, the real problem started when some wives began complaining quietly amongst themselves. See, my husband now quotes Daddy G.O. before every argument. My own said questioning him is rebellion. One day this man timed the way I answered him, and then he fired me back with some quotes from Daddy G.O.'s live stream. The women started thinking for themselves. Maybe all this submission teaching has entered some men's heads too much. One evening, after women's fellowship, a few of them sat briefly with Mama Ruth while arranging chairs. And then the conversation started casually until one woman asked, Mommy, are you sure you are actually happy? Mama Ruth became quiet. Mama Ruth kept quiet for a few seconds before she answered. Living with somebody that must always be right can tire out a person. And that is my condition, my sister. The woman looked at her with pity. And let me tell you, after that women's fellowship conversation, Pastor Elijah's image started failing slowly like bad network during rain. At first, it was the online comments. Daddy G.O., does submission mean fear? What about kindness from the both partners? I mean, can peace exist without control? Because it's looking like our men are controlling us too much. Then his live stream views started dropping. One clip went viral for the wrong reason after somebody commented, "Hope mommy is finally resting now. I heard your house is a military ground." The church atmosphere changed as well. Women no longer shouted, "Yes, daddy, speak to us," with their full chest like before. Some even stopped attending his marriage counseling completely because it was just one-sided. Then one Sunday morning during testimony time, one woman stood up and said, "I stopped following too much online marriage advice and started talking honestly with my husband again. Our home is peaceful now. Plenty influencers full online they give advice left, right and center, scattering people's mentality about marriage." The whole became awkward immediately. Pastor's assistants even started avoiding eye contact. I mean, can you see where this is going? Women are finally being awakened. They are finally seeing those messages for what they really were. Because they were just one-sided. You're teaching women how to submit. Fine. What are you teaching the men? And then you're teaching the submission in a wrong way. Submission is not about swallowing everything that happens in your home. It's not about keeping quiet when you're being subjugated. It's not about swallowing your thoughts and not airing your opinions. That is clearly not what submission was about. And women were finally seeing it. So slowly they were beginning to rebel against these teachings. And it was very evident in how they turn up in church, how they listen to him, how they interpret what he was saying. And again, they saw the effects it was having on the men. He was boosting their egos, giving them the morale to treat their wives wrongly. And it was as if Pastor Elisha's whole efforts over the years were being shattered because all of a sudden, women's eyes were finally opened. And then it made him to start looking into his own home. Because one day he came back from work and his children and his wife were in the kitchen laughing and gisting. And immediately he entered, one child whispered, "Daddy is home." And everybody coordinated. Everybody became quiet. And that made him realize that his family did not feel peace around him at all. They felt pressure and tension. That night, he sat alone in the sitting room after everybody had slept. And then for the first time, he looked within himself honestly. This one was not about live streaming or social media or likes or whatever. He looked within himself as a human being with conscience. And he told himself that, true, you no really try. Because what he saw humbled him. So the next morning, he gathered his family. Mama Ruth was shocked when the man held her hand and said, "I am sorry." Is this a movie? The children looked at each other because apology was not something they were used to hearing from their father. But then he didn't stop there, he continued. He said, "I thought I was building discipline, but I was removing peace and harmony from my home, and that is not what I want." Mama Ruth's eyes became filled with tears immediately. A few days later, Pastor Eliza shocked the church again because during service, he stood on the altar and confessed openly. "Over the years, I have thought many things. Some are good, some are not so good. But I have not even been practicing the good ones with love." He apologized for his wrong teachings and said that he would take his time to start correcting those teachings over again, to start addressing both parties in the marriage, because it takes two to work. Everybody was impressed. They saw a man that was ready to change, that was ready for accountability. Because true, the home must be nurtured with love and not controlled into existence. The end. And we've come to the end of today's story, my paddies. What are the moral lessons you derived from this story? I would like to know in the comment sections below. Do you know anybody that comes across as thief in their homes? Let us know your experience down below so that we can learn from each other. At the same time, I want to thank you all, my paddies, for your love and support. We are at 300 and we can keep going higher. So please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so. and get it to 1,000 subscribers. I trust you guys. Thank you so much. Kindly like this video and share it to everyone you know. And I promise you, they will thank you for it. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Ngwanu. Bye.